The time is now for the Dr. Bob Sports Podcast. I am Tanner. I am our head of analytics, and I'm in my 7th year working alongside Bob, originating our NFL and college basketball bets. And today, as always, I'm joined by our digital media specialist, Grant. How we doing?
Doing great, Tan. Back in Vegas. We're starting to hit that fall weather. It's a nice 90 degrees here, so yeah, no complaints.
Well, speaking of fall, we have been working hard on setting our college basketball priors on Fridays and Saturdays when I don't spend as much time on the NFL. So it's been 7 days a week for me all month of October, but I am pumped for college basketball to come back. I'm a Kansas alumni, and it looks like we are going to have the number one team in the country. So college basketball can't get here soon enough.
Yeah, still we're waiting on the ban for KU basketball here, but
No, the FBI ruling came out. No sanctions except those vacated wins and whatever. We were there. We saw us make that Final Four. You can't take that away from us in 2018.
yeah, they're paying someone under the table, but let's get into the NFL here. All right, our first segment is where we will be grading the scripters on how they did for episode 5 of this new NFL season. We had a great game as a Dallas hater, as San Francisco has solidified themselves atop the NFC. I mean, they are listed at plus 140 on Chris after just dismantling the Cowboys 42-10 on Sunday night. Purdy's 4 touchdown passes against Dallas marked his 8th career game with 2 or more touchdown passes, tying him with Hall of Fame QB Kurt Warner and Deshaun Watson for the most games with 2 or more passing TDs in a player's first 10 starts. Purdy is now the first quarterback in the Super Bowl era to start 5-0 in both his first and second NFL seasons, and the only quarterback who has won more consecutive games to start a career is Ben Roethlisberger with 15.
That's kind of crazy that Roethlisberger started with 15 straight wins. I don't necessarily remember that. I guess I was in elementary school at the time, but that is wild. Anyways, back to Purdy. I mean, he is having one of the most efficient seasons we've ever seen. In fact, it is the most efficient season for a quarterback since 2000. He's averaging 0.5 EPA per play. That means every time that Purdy drops back, he is adding a half point to the 49ers offense. Absolutely insane. Even more surprising, he's better throwing outside the numbers than inside, which you wouldn't expect for a Kyle Shanahan offense, especially with his arm strength limitations. Another thing you wouldn't expect from those limitations is that he's leading the league, completing 72% of his passes with 10-plus air yards. So I don't know. I mean, the only way that people were talking about in the offseason that Purdy would be slowed down was maybe, his arm strength not being there, especially after the elbow injury. But here he is dominating the NFL in the arm strength category. So it's just been insane to see what Purdy has done to start the year.
Yeah, and I could still hear the echoes of MV Purdy. MV Purdy. I mean, do you think there's value here at 4-1?
I don't know. I mean, 4-1, it's pretty low for Purdy, especially because I just don't know how much credit he's going to get. I mean, we already saw Kyle Shanahan take Jimmy Garoppolo to a Super Bowl. So I just don't know if Purdy would win it, even if the 49ers went 15-2 this season. I feel like Kyle Shanahan, Coach of the Year, is more likely, and that's listed at 5-1 right now.
Yeah, that was one that you touched on in the awards show. I mean, I think we both talked about how Shanahan, Coach of the Year. I mean, this team, we know they're going to be good, and Purdy's not going to get the credit. So I think that's a good one.
And he hasn't won Coach of the Year yet. So this could be the year for Shanahan to do it, especially if they do that 15-2 like I was talking about.
Let's shift over to our next segment. We've got the injury watch, and it looks like we might be seeing the Ravens get all 5 starting linemen back.
Yeah, I mean, so right tackle Morgan Moses was out last game. We touched on how that would be a problem against TJ Watt, but backup Patrick McCarry was able to hold up until he was sidelined, which left third stringer Daniel Falele out there. The Ravens gained 5.7 yards per play with McCarry on the field, but it dropped to just 3.3 yards per play once McCarry was sidelined. But Morgan Moses is returning to practice this week. McCarry doesn't look like he's going to be out for a long time either. He might be available on Sunday as well. And that means Baltimore could have their original starting 5 offensive linemen together for the first game since week 1. And Morgan Moses and left tackle Ronnie Stanley will go a long way in limiting Tennessee's edge defenders, Danico Autry and Arden Key, who have combined for 32 pressures already this season.
Yeah, we see Detroit's defense is really banged up. Does Branch have a chance to come back and play this week?
Well, maybe, but right now it's looking like Branch is going to miss another game. And we know that Detroit's secondary is already without starting safety CJ Gardner-Johnson. And then they lost Emmanuel Mosley to another torn ACL. It's just insane. That guy, tears his ACL last year, signs with the Lions. Has to miss the start of the season, gets out there for his first game, and then just tears his other ACL. So terrible. Unfortunate for Mosley. And then, like you said, Branch could miss this game as well. So that'd be 3 starters in the Lions secondary out. Lions backup cornerback Jerry Jacobs will definitely lose his matchup against Mike Evans, who's 12th in EPA per target.
Yeah, and the Cardinals secondary is looking a little flimsy as well.
Yeah, I mean, Arizona's defense ranks 31st in explosive pass rate allowed, as they've been without 4-time Pro Bowl safety Budda Baker. But now it looks like they're going to also be missing nickelback Jalen Thompson, who ranks 7th in yards per cover snap allowed in the slot. And that is bad in this matchup against the Rams, who love to throw to slot receivers, whether it's Puka Nacua in there or now Cooper Kupp in the slot, who led the team with 8 receptions and 118 receiving yards in his first game back last week.
Yeah, and how has Derek Carr's AC joint injury been impacting his throwing?
Yeah, well, we didn't see Carr miss any games with that AC joint injury, but it certainly limited explosiveness for the Saints offense. Carr averaged just 0.4 completed air yards in week 4 in his first game playing through the injury. Now that went up to 4.9 completed air yards last week against the Patriots, but that's still pretty low, near the bottom of the NFL. And you have to look back before the injury. Carr had 17 passes with at least 20 air yards in his first 3 games. That's the second most of any quarterback in the first 3 weeks of this season. And AC sprains typically heal after a few weeks, so I expect Carr to go back throwing deep on Sunday, which should open things up underneath as well for Alvin Kamara in the screen game.
Yeah, we saw the Eagles. They had some secondary issues, but they went out and made a pretty good signing here.
Yeah, shout out Eagles GM Howie Roseman. He's always doing shrewd things like this in the free agency market. And we saw their starting nickelback, Avonte Maddox, went out for the season, and backup Mario Goodrich just wasn't cutting it, surrendering 2.76 yards per cover snap in the slot. So they went out, they signed Bradley Roby. He played a little bit in his first game, just a few days after signing, and it was excellent. He allowed negative 4 yards on 5 targets into his coverage in the slot. And we expect Roby will get a full workload coming into his second game with the Eagles. So it looks like Howie Roseman has plugged that hole that they had in their secondary.
Yeah, and the Colts lost their starting quarterback with an AC joint injury as well. How big is this going to be for them?
Well, I mean, Anthony Richardson, it's been tough for him. I mean, he's now exited 3 games with injury in 5 weeks, but that means we've got a decent sample size on Gardner Minshew, and they're averaging basically the same in EPA per play. Richardson's at 0.06 EPA per play, and Minshew is at 0.04 EPA per play, which ranks 14th and 16th respectively in the NFL. So not a major difference between the two. However, Minshew is certainly less mobile, and the Indianapolis ground game is in trouble on Sunday without the threat of Richardson's legs and against the Jaguars defense, who rank 4th in rush success rate allowed. And the Jaguars will be getting back linebacker Devon Lloyd on the field after backup Chad Muma had a 20% missed tackle rate in the last 2 weeks. So getting Lloyd back on the field could make this Jaguars run defense even better.
Yeah, and it looks like Carolina might be missing Miles Sanders this week. How's this going to impact their running game?
Well, actually, I kind of feel like maybe the Panthers' run game could get a little bit better missing Miles Sanders. He only has an 8% forced missed tackle rate, and he's gaining only 2.1 yards after contact, 3rd worst among running backs. And now, I mean, if he tried to play through this shoulder injury, it could be even worse for Sanders. So now, if they give a full workload to Chuba Hubbard, who has a 29% forced missed tackle rate and is averaging 1.3 more yards per carry than Sanders this season, I think the Panthers' run game could actually be a little bit better if Sanders is sidelined.
Yeah, and another running back, Devon Achane, he got put on IR. He was just exploding once he got his shot this year.
Yeah, and it could have been a massive game for Devon Achane this week. The Dolphins lead the league in EPA per rush, and the Panthers are surrendering a league high 50% rush success rate. But I mean, it's tough. I still think the Dolphins will be able to move the ball on the ground, but certainly not as explosive without Achane, who's 7.4 yards after contact. Not only leads the NFL by a significant margin, but it's also better than every other running back's overall yards per rush. So to say that again, he's averaging more yards after contact than any other running back in the NFL is averaging just overall, which was insane. It's one of the most explosive starts to a career we've ever seen. So, the Dolphins rush game certainly going to take a step back without Achane, but I mean, the Panthers run defense is so bad, they're still going to be able to move the ball on the ground.
All right, let's shift it over to the public opinion talk with me. And I have been in the streets of Twitter getting all of the scoops, and everyone is all over Desmond Ridder as he is the homecoming king. This guy is 31-0 at home as a starter in college and the NFL. And I wish we could go back to high school because I'm sure the stats would be even better there.
Yeah, I mean, he averaged a career high 8.9 yards per pass play last week in that win over the Texans. But I think Ridder's streak might be in jeopardy this week. I mean, these fun trends have a way of ending right after the media gets a hold of them. Remember, Trevor Lawrence never loses on a Saturday when the Chiefs played the Jaguars in the playoffs last year. That one ended. But I mean, Ridder, there's just some things about his game that seem a little bit unsustainable to me. First of all, he only has a 1.9% interception rate, despite a 5.5% turnover-worthy play rate, according to PFF, which is the second highest turnover-worthy play rate in the league. And we saw Kyle Pitts have such a big game with Ridder last week, but Washington's defense is allowing just a 39% success rate to tight end, sixth in the NFL. So Ridder will not likely have Pitts available at least as much as he did last week. And then Ridder targeted Drake London on a season high 9 times last week, but London will be shut down on Sunday by cornerback Kendall Fuller, who ranks second in yards per cover snap allowed. So I'm not really liking the matchups for Ridder's weapons this week. And also, his offensive line's a little bit vulnerable. I mean, rookie left guard Matthew Bergeron lining up across from interior defender Jonathan Allen, who's fifth in pressures. I mean, that's a big mismatch in favor of the Commanders. So I think this might be the first time we see Desmond Ridder lose at home.
Yeah, that's a tough matchup for them. But let's shift it over to our weather of the week. And we've got some pretty bad scoring conditions this week.
Yeah, certainly both New York games with the Jets and Bills hosting have a chance to be sloppy, but both of those stadiums have turf, which negates some of the potential downside. I mean, we see when it's wet and rainy in natural grass, the field really slows down in the mud. So both Jets and Bills don't have natural grass at their stadium, so it won't be that bad. Actually, the worst weather conditions this week are in Chicago. We have the environment 3.6 points worse than average, and weather will make it nearly impossible for Justin Fields to go downfield for wide receiver DJ Moore, who gained 221 yards on hitches and go routes last week. Those are going to be pretty much taken away due to the high winds and rain on Sunday. So I'm mostly worried about sloppy conditions in Chicago at Soldier Field.
Yeah, we've got our last London game of the year. And you gave out on last week's podcast, Jaguars first half, playing on the time zone advantage. You got anything to note here on this Ravens-Titans game?
Well, it is interesting to see what the Ravens are doing. So Baltimore was embarrassed by Jacksonville, losing 44-7 the last time they went to London all the way back in 2017. So John Harbaugh decided to move the Ravens' entire operation, everything from video to medical to the equipment team. Everyone moved to London for the entire week, and the Ravens are using all of their practices in London while getting 6 nights of sleep in the new time zone. So this is the first time we've ever seen a team going to London take this drastic of an approach, and I like it. I think it is going to work. They should be fully adjusted for the game that kicks off at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time, which is 2:30 p.m. local in London. Now, the Titans are going on Friday. That's pretty standard for teams going to London. I think you have to give the Ravens the edge against Tennessee just because of how much work they have put into making sure this London trip goes smoothly.
Yeah, I saw on the Pat McAfee show the other day, they were talking about the team that shows up to London last has typically won most of these battles, except for what just happened last week. So that didn't really make any sense to me. And I think Baltimore's going with the right strategy here.
Yeah, and I mean, usually the team that shows up last, they're just talking about like, a 12 to 18 hour difference because they almost always go on Thursday or Friday. But this is a drastic difference. And I think, I mean, we've been playing on these time zone edges for the last couple of seasons. We talked about how we won on Tampa Bay in that Germany game because it was a 6:30 a.m. Body clock time for the Seahawks players. We just played the Jaguars in the first half last week, and the Bills came out completely flat because they went on Friday while the Jaguars had already been there for a week. And now we're basically seeing the Ravens are going to be there for the entire week, and it's a similar situation. So I think we could see something like we saw with Buffalo's offense, with the Titans offense this week.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got stock up, stock down. Who's got their stock trending up for you right now?
For me, stock up is Terry McLaurin. So first of all, I'm actually loving what Commanders offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy is doing thus far. He ranks 4th in our offensive play calling metrics. And Washington's offense has just a 5% run rate on 2nd and 10 following a first down incompletion. And that's one of the major sins that offensive coordinators consistently do in the NFL is getting themselves into 2nd and 10 and deciding I need to run it to make it 3rd and 8. That is a drive killer. So to see Washington do that at the second lowest rate in the league, that's very encouraging. And then to talk about Terry McLaurin, he's had a turf toe injury to start the season. It clearly affected him. His average speed this year is just 13.6 miles per hour, nearly a full mile per hour slower than his career average, according to the tracking data. Now, Terry McLaurin's toe is back to normal for week 6. He's off the injury report, and he still leads Washington's offense with 340 intended air yards. So I'm expecting a breakout game for Terry McLaurin, and he should be able to get some downfield shots with Sam Howell this week with his toe finally healed.
I like it. Scary Terry on the way up, but who's got their stock trending down this week?
Well, trending down this week and maybe for the rest of the season, it's just been a cakewalk for the New Orleans defense. They are overrated in my mind after the schedule they've seen in the opening 5 weeks. They've gone against the Titans, Panthers, Packers, Bucks, and Patriots. None of those offenses rank above average in yards per play. And now the Saints will play 11 of their 12 remaining games this season in a dome starting this week in Houston. So it's definitely tougher for defenses in a dome with those perfect scoring conditions. They're certainly going to face a more difficult strength of opposing set of offenses down the stretch. And I think this New Orleans defense is going to drop off the rest of the way.
All right, and let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got the DraftKings player of the slate. And last week you picked Zach Ertz, who didn't get the yardage we wanted, but he went 2 for 10, and he did find the end zone for the first time all season. But who's your guy this week?
Yeah, we needed him to find the end zone. I was shocked to see the low amount of yardage for Ertz. He did still deliver on he was only 3,500. So the touchdown got him there to deliver on the price tag. But you're not winning any tournaments with if you had Zach Ertz in your lineup last week. So let's try and pick a player that you can win a tournament with. And this week I've got Calvin Ridley at 6,700. This is the most expensive player I've ever chosen for this segment, but he's going to have a major week. The Colts are down to their 4th option at outside cornerback after benching Darrell Baker and Dallas Flowers, now scheduled to miss the rest of the season with an Achilles injury. I mean, we saw DeAndre Hopkins average 0.81 more yards per route run against Indianapolis last week than he did in his first 4 games. And Calvin Ridley has a 58% success rate. That's 19th among wide receivers. And he'll be going against that 4th option cornerback, Jalen Jones. Now, Colts defensive coordinator Gus Bradley calls cover 3 at the highest rate in the NFL. And Trevor Lawrence is averaging over 10 yards per attempt against cover 3 this year. Ridley is gaining 4.6 yards per route run versus cover 3. So I think Ridley is going to be targeted dramatically due to the coverage the Colts put out there. He has an excellent matchup against one of the worst boundary cornerbacks in the NFL, and we already saw Ridley torch this defense. He had 7 for 122 in week 1 against Indianapolis. So I love Calvin Ridley at 6,700 on Sunday.
Yeah, I gotta love some Calvin Ridley talk here. That guy is an absolute dog. He's still trying to get paid off that rookie deal, but let's shift it over to our last segment, and we've got our Monday night primetime preview with the Cowboys versus Chargers. I mean, this feels like a battle of the teams that this is our year, but I mean, it just doesn't help when your quarterback plays like Dak did the other night.
Yeah, I mean, he averaged a season low 5.2 yards per pass play, and he threw 3 interceptions. Now, it'd be all right if Dak was throwing picks, aggressively challenging defenses downfield, but he's throwing short of the sticks at the 3rd highest rate in the NFL. So he's throwing short and still throwing picks. That's a recipe for disaster, and it doesn't look like it'll turn around for Prescott on Monday night against this Chargers defense with an 80% zone rate, because Prescott's yards per attempt versus zone are just 74% of his yards per attempt against man. And I mean, the reason that the Cowboys are better against man is because CeeDee Lamb is so great against man, but he's not as good against zone. In fact, he's averaging more than a yard per route run fewer against zone this season.
Yeah, how worried should Dak be about Khalil Mack, who had 6 sacks in the game before the bye week?
Yeah, that was crazy to see. But I think Mack mostly will be limited in this matchup. He'll be lining across from left tackle Tyron Smith, one of the best left tackles in the NFL, and he's conceding just a 3% pressure rate this season. I'm more worried about Dallas right tackle Terrence Steele, who's surrendered 5 quarterback hits already. That's second most in the league. And he's going to either be lining up across from Joey Bosa or Tuli Tuipulotu, who ranks 12th in pass rushing efficiency. Now, Bosa missed the game before the bye with a hamstring and toe injuries, but Bosa could be back on Monday night. Either way, his backup, Tuli, has been excellent. So Dak's got to be more worried about Terrence Steele than Khalil Mack going for another 6-sack game.
Yeah, I mean, what are the thoughts on this Dallas defense after just getting 42 points hung up on them?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. The Cowboys defense, even after that game, is still getting pressure on over half of opponents' dropbacks. That's insane. Now, I just want to put that into context. Cleveland's defense is second in pressure rate at 41%. So that means the gap between Dallas and Cleveland in second is the same as the gap between the Browns and the Rams in 22nd. I mean, we will never see a team get pressure on over half of dropbacks. Now, the Chargers offensive line ranks 4th in pass blocking efficiency, but they lost starting center Corey Linsley, and he's one of the best centers in the NFL. In fact, he led all centers in pass blocking efficiency in 2022. He's worth a half point by our numbers, and him being out, backup center Will Clapp lining up across from Osa Odigizua, who ranked 4th in pass rushing efficiency among interior defenders. Not a good sign for Justin Herbert.
Yeah, and the little revenge game here for Kellen Moore. What can he do to slow down the Cowboys' pass rush?
Well, he's going to have to call a lot of quick routes, and their best quick route wide receiver, obviously Keenan Allen. He's got a favorable matchup on the inside. Dallas nickelback Jordan Lewis is surrendering over 2 yards per slot cover snap, and Allen is 7th in EPA per target. Now, when they don't target Allen on those quick slants, Moore is going to try and slow down this pass rush with the ground game, especially if Austin Eckler is able to suit up for the first time since week 1. Dallas ranks 31st in rush success rate allowed, and now they lost their best linebacker, Leighton Vander Esch. He's on the injured reserve after a neck injury against the 49ers. So this Dallas rush defense, certainly the weak point, and if Austin Eckler is back, I could see them pounding the rock.
All right, and we were 1-1 on props last week, but that puts you at 4-1 on the season. What do you have for the primetime prop on Monday night?
I'm going to go with Joshua Palmer under receptions. He'll likely be mostly lined up across from the Cowboys' best cornerback, Stephon Gilmore, and I'm just not sure Herbert is going to have the time in the pocket to fire these deep shots against that Dallas pass rush. And Palmer leads the Chargers with 7 targets on passes with 20-plus air yards. And we talked about how they're going to feed Keenan Allen. Usually teams get rookies more involved coming out of the bye, so we could see a larger workload for that first-round pick, Quentin Johnson. I mean, someone's going to have to take a hit in this Chargers passing game, and that feels like it's going to be Josh Palmer to me. So I'm going to say Josh Palmer under receptions for the primetime prop.
I love the Palmer prop there, Tan. That's a good one, but I think that will do it for our Week 6 NFL preview. Make sure to head over to drbobsports.com to check out the free analysis for this weekend's games, and we will be back next Friday to preview Week 7. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe.